looking up Dr. Lori Koger's Healthy Dog Workshop because she has a PDF of like a vaccine schedule.
She does. That's actually the one that I always send out to people anytime they have questions about what they should do, because I think Dr. Lori Koger I think she has our mindset, but she's also a practicing veterinarian, so she has liability for veterinarians in her thoughts as well. And so that kind of makes it, I don't know, maybe a little easier to digest for veterinarians that are seeing it.
Yeah.
If a pet parent brings that in to their veterinarian's office, that maybe it's gonna be a little more well received. I don't know, maybe. Anyway, all right,
She's
she is. Guys, thank you so much for joining us back on Pet Health Junkies. My name is Jessica. Janet and Pam are with me as well. And today we are talking about common sense pet parenting because, Lord have mercy, common sense isn't so common.
No, it's not.
Is
But
it too early to plead the fifth?
should it should be. It should be.
Oh my gracious. And here's the thing, and I was just talking to a potential client right before we got on this call. One of the things that came up was how, she was doing the best she could with the information that she had. She knew her dog was having food sensitivities, or she felt that way. She didn't want her dog to continue to be on Apoquel, so she stopped the Apoquel all on her own without help or guidance. And she found a protein that her dog would eat, started adding that to the kibble, and has been feeding that ever since. And I told her, I said, don't blame yourself. It's not your fault that we have been marketed to so heavily for so long by kibble manufacturers to find what works for your animal, their food, and never change it, right? So it's really hard for people to realize, even when they're going through these issues with their pets and they are genuinely trying to do the right things, that there are still going to be these like biases in the back of their minds where it's like, okay, this works, so this is what I'm going to do. Variety and rotation is so important, and that has been kind of trained out of us.
Yes.
Well, and
So
also not thinking for ourselves has been trained out of us. It's like
True.
listen to the authority figure and don't ask questions and don't trust your intuition. If something feels off, that's that's a flashing warning sign. We have to start listening to that instead of just blindly taking someone's word for it, or
Following.
following orders, advice, whatever, without questioning.
So that ties into, y'all know I'm going to have a lot of stories. So,
Please.
and that ties into a dear customer that we had in the store earlier this week. And the customer came in and was asking for the same case of cans as he normally does. But this time he added, and mind you, I'll back up. We, like you both said, in the store, we talk about rotational feeding and the health benefits of feeding different proteins throughout the dog's life. So in this instance, we're usually not heard. It's like, okay, I'll take that under advisement. And like you said, Pam, they need to, think for themselves, but it usually doesn't go further than there. And in this case, that's what I'm talking about. So today, or that day, he's picking up his case of food and says that the dog is not wanting to eat it. And of course,
shocker.
in this industry, when you've been in it as long as we have now, going on a decade, and God bless those that have been doing it 2 decades, 3
Longer.
decades. And yeah,
Right.
because we are starting to see, I think, the tides turn in our tenure that we've been in the industry. I can't imagine being a maverick in the healthy pet space, in the natural health space, like the doctors that we've interviewed, here, and those that we,
Yeah.
love and learn from. So God bless them for making a way for those of us that came along. Anyhow, we started talking about the fact that it's not normal, or common sense tells you a dog shouldn't refuse to eat. It's a red flag.
Yes.
And so as I received the comment, it's just a dog. And I was like, okay, knife through the heart. I feel sorry for said pet, but you have to be sensitive and empathetic, right?
Yeah.
Because we've all been probably where, our clients and customers have been at some point or another. And so we talked about, well, if I had to eat, or if you had to eat, let's say pork every meal, every single day, do you think that you would get tired of it? And we got the comment of, well, I would just be happy to have, to eat whatever was given to me. And I was like, okay, so this is where how we're going to play it.
Mhm.
So,
I don't think that's an honest answer, number one.
No.
no, and
That's a
I'm being,
cop-out answer. Yes.
yes,
Yeah, and you know that.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so I was like, okay. So we just started, sharing the science about rotational feeding. And in the meantime, one of our team went around and picked up some freeze dried raw. And because he did say that he adds some of our like hearts and livers and things of that nature to the bowl, and which is great. And we applauded that. And we really made a big deal out of that. But we were talking to him about just adding some of the freeze dried raw. And going back to the topic of this podcast about common sense things, he did not take what we suggested. He did not even add a single can of a different protein to try, because we could do a mixed case. But I think that those of you listening, pet parents, that if you've experienced this, take a step back, take a breath, and just think about it, and put yourself in that position. We don't eat the same thing every meal. We are not very different from our little, canine friends and our makeup. So Kim agreed. She said, "We're superior, Janet." What do you mean we're not very different?
That's funny.
But anyhow, common sense. You need to rotate. Even the health benefits aside.
Yeah.
Yeah. So variety is
Yeah,
the spice of life.
it is. And I have to, I'm going to throw in a story with that. It's just a dog thing because it bothers me. I have never in I grew up that way. I
Yes.
grew
Yes.
up where people around me said things like that. And it never in my entire life sat right with me. And I think that's why I didn't get a dog until later in life, because that was all I had experienced was dogs live outside. They're just dogs. They're just used for hunting. They're not pets. They don't come in the house. Like that's how I grew up. And it took me, I guess, even though I had cats and I had indoor cats, like it just took me a while to realize that like I could make my own way and make my own decisions about, having a dog and bringing a dog into the house, and also learning and understanding how they are companions, because that's not how I grew up, right? And so recently, actually, just the week before we're recording this podcast, I went and I stayed with my grandparents for a few days and I took my dog Kim. And this was so to just put this in perspective, my grandparents on my father's side, they are living in a house that my great grandparents, so my dad's dad,
Wow.
built in the Kim, my dog, in 2025 is the first dog that has ever stepped foot in that house. Okay.
Did they have pets?
They have never had pets. They had
Okay.
one dog when my father was really little and for whatever reason couldn't keep the dog and brought it up to my great grandparents' house, which is now my grandparents' house. And it remained an outside dog there. And somebody stole the dog because it was a purebred collie. So probably not super, like, back in the maybe 70s, purebred dogs out in the country, you don't see those too often. Anyway, my grandfather got really attached to her really quickly. But my grandmother, so her side of the family, they grew up very similarly to my grandfather's side of the family, very, very poor. And animals aren't companions to them, and they never have been companions. to that side of the family. And so it was just interesting to see. I walked in, two stories actually. I walked in, brought Kim inside. My grandfather immediately fell in love with her, and she followed him back into his bedroom. And as she was doing that, my grandmother looked at me and was like, he is going to get attached to that dog and he's going to want one. Just like, now, mind you, my grandmother is 86, almost 80. She'll be 87 years old later this year. So she's like, she doesn't want a pet. She's not had a pet. She's not into it. But like that is a mindset that people have. And then my great aunt came over the following day, and she was telling, because I had Kim there, telling a story about when she had a dog when her husband was still alive, and her husband's been passed 24 years ago. So this was a while back. And that dog, when that dog passed away, she knew her husband was just going to be beside himself, and she had things going on in their life, taking real estate tests, all the things. So she was like, I knew I had to bury that dog before Frank came home because he was going to lose it. So like, that's just kind of the mentality that some people have, where like animals aren't companions. You know what I mean? So I don't want to like completely, I don't think it's right. It's never sat right with me, but also I can see how this is something that has been passed along for many generations in some families. I don't think it's right.
What you're
But
saying is that the dog is lucky to live indoors and get canned food
yes, probably.
with an occasional, with a little, chopped up heart or liver on it. So
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, I think that does go to say like where that person's capacity is at, right?
yeah, exactly.
And you're the one always telling me to meet people where
They're at. And that's exactly what just came to my mind. I'm like, and in the store, every encounter, we have to, it is it's a circle. You have to, assess where people are, and then, give the information, in, a kind, matter of fact, educational way, because everybody is at a different level. And even common sense wise, I mean, with some people, a lot of people, they just don't think about things in the way that you do, or just in a certain way. And of course, in the lane that we three are in, we always are looking out for the health of the pet and what's going to benefit the pet, not take away. So, immediately we are like, well, okay, the dog isn't eating. That is a red flag. So how can we need to know what the dog is being fed. And, this will segue into some other things we wanted to talk about on the podcast. Are there things that the dog is being administered that could be interrupting their appetite or making them not feel well, which then interrupts their, eat.
Meanwhile, Aylin is like, I don't care that you're recording a podcast.
I'm just gonna sit right here and she's purring.
Yeah,
Aw,
she's
Her little vibration.
muffling Pam's speaker right now.
yeah, muffling your speaker. I have Hope
She's
at
my
my feet, but she doesn't purr. She barks really loud.
Yes, she does. Let me see if I can get this speaker up here. There we go.
There you go.
Do you want to talk about flea and tick preventatives and
Yeah, like
how common sense comes into play there?
yes, I mean you'd think this would be common sense, but if someone is listening to this and your vet says your indoor cat needs to have year-round flea treatment
Or dog.
or dog, what?
Why?
Make that makes why? Like make that make sense to me. I'm just flabbergasted that people just don't stop and go, why? When their vet says that, they put the fear of fleas into people. Well, they're going to get fleas if, they go outside or they can come in your house or whatever.
I don't.
I don't either.
Right.
I don't either. And then
And my feet touch the ground just like theirs.
right. And some people think that there's fleas everywhere outside you go, and that's not
Right.
true.
No.
Like my cats go outside doesn't mean I don't have fleas in my backyard apparently because I don't have fleas on my cats. And they don't get flea treatments. But years ago, I remember because I was that pet parent who was just like, did what they were told. Put this nasty topical flea treatment on the back of the neck of your cats. Oh my God, they were like, hell no. And they were just trying to get away as fast as they could, and it was so stressful. And of course the package says, do not get this on your hands.
Yeah. You're right.
Okay, if it's not safe for me to have on my hands, why should I be putting it on the back of my cat's neck,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
which is close to their brain?
Right.
Make that make sense to me.
Yeah.
And
But
they were indoor, and they were totally indoors. Never went outside. We were in a townhome in Houston.
litter
Never
box.
went outside. It's like, what am I doing? No. I'm like, you chalk up, sooner or later, common sense comes to your head, and you're like, oh, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. This is stupid.
Well, what about the part about, again, I used to be that way as well, even with my own human doctors. You
Yeah.
said, what? Okay. No questions asked.
Yeah.
And then, the symptoms start piling on year after year after year. And before long, you have, this many symptoms and you don't feel good. Well, the same thing is happening to our pets.
Yeah.
And for the same reasons, everything that they ingest, be it food or water, which I want to come back around to common sense and the food bowls and water bowls, but medicines. So all of it goes into the bloodstream. And the bloodstream touches 100% of the body. It touches neurologically. Like you
Yes.
mentioned, the brain, it touches all the organs. And just, I thought that because they enjoyed eating the treat, well, it must be good. It's yummy. They want to eat it. It must be good. With my cat, I thought since I was putting it on his back, that it was safer. I didn't think back then it's less toxic, because that's what they are, whether they're eating it or putting it on their skin.
Yeah.
It's
It's
toxic.
toxic.
That never came into my mindset until years later. But I thought somehow putting it on topically was safer. It still goes into the bloodstream. How do you think it works? And
Yeah.
that was a big aha moment for me when, through my studying and reading, I learned the mechanism by it works, whether they ingest it orally or I put it on them topically. And so I went to my vet a decade ago, and I had the technician in the office with me and two of the dogs. And I had a good rapport with the technician. And I said, can I ask you a question? Because this is right when I had first started discovering and having all these aha moments. And I said, whether it's topically or orally, I said, when I give the heartworm, the flea, the tick, pill to my pets and they eat it, it goes into the digestive system. It's digested into the bloodstream, and it has pesticides in it. Even though they say it's a small dose and it's safe. There's another common sense thing there we could touch on. And I said, but it circulates through the bloodstream 24/7. And then the flea or the tick or the mosquito bites my pet, maybe, because I also have all double coated dogs. Good luck getting through to the skin if you're a mosquito. Anyhow, I said, but the parasite, in other words, bites my dog, and then they ingest the poison just a tiny bit because they're, microscopic, and then they die because of what they got from biting my pet. And she said, uh-huh. And I said, thank you. I will not be taking any of that today or
Yeah.
ever again.
And how is that not harming my pet?
That's a great question.
Right.
And how is that not harming my pet? Um, Now I want to fast forward a decade. My pets don't have fleas, they don't have ticks, they don't have heartworm, and they're all, except for the new puppy, they're all between the ages of 12 and 15. And they're probably in part between the ages of 12 and 15 without problems because I haven't poisoned them
Yes.
over and over and over and over again.
Yes.
Well, and the other thing too that because I have had multiple people on social media say this to me when anytime I talk about this is I don't want my dog getting a tick-borne illness.
Made
Okay,
that
but that tick has to bite your dog
right.
to get the poison. So how are we preventing tick-borne illnesses? People do not understand how these toxins work, how these quote unquote medications work. And so they have false hope in them, in my opinion.
True.
They are
Yeah.
being lied to, in my
Mhm.
opinion, that this toxin, by putting this toxin in or on your pet, that they are somehow going to be saved from tick-borne illnesses.
True.
And rightfully so, there are some really horrible ones out there, but that's just hands down not true.
Right. Yeah. It's make believe to to say that, they're not going to or can't or 100% can't. I mean, and nothing can claim 100%. But, I think that when you were talking about going into the clinic, and I think, Pam, you said that they use, did you say fear mongering? Did you use that word or
Yeah, something to that. It's all
something to that
fear.
effect where they kind
They
of
put the
scare
fear of
you?
God in you. Yeah.
That. So, how many times have you and our listeners been shown the map of the United States or of Texas, and it's the heat map showing the highest concentration of like fleas and ticks and whatnot? You remember, what I'm
And
talking about?
heartworm.
I
Yeah.
Well, and then
haven't seen one in a really long time. So,
Right.
they
Yeah.
also have the like jar that has a heart in it that's infested with heartworms, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I
that is
promise you that's a kibble-fed dog.
probably.
100%.
Yeah, probably so, but and it's awful, don't get me
It
wrong. I have
is.
known many dogs, sadly, that were exposed and that happened. But let's pull the common sense into that. So indoor cat, indoor dogs. My dogs go out to play. We go for walks. We go to the potty outside, but we don't have fleas and ticks in the yard. We do treat the yard, but we treat it with natural products that are available, which was another thing that I never knew again until I started studying and then opened my store. And I was just thrilled that there were just as effective products on the market that are not harmful that I can actually get on me, to Pam's point about
Yeah,
the warning saying, do not get this on your hands. Do not expose it to children. If
yeah,
you're pregnant, don't touch this. I mean, my goodness. Well, I could spray everything, including, you know, my neighbor's baby, myself, which I do use it, what I use on the dogs, but I only use it during the summertime. Like right now, we've started to have a few mosquitoes,
hmm
and I actually was spraying some this morning while I was having my coffee, and I was watching them die, and I took some video just to show that it really works.
it
I mean,
really
you spray
works.
it and they go to the ground and they're dead. But anyhow, it's the common sense part comes into, look at where you live. In the front yard, we have herds of deer that come through our neighborhood. They have fleas and ticks. We do spray the front yard, but we go lay in the backyard. We're not necessarily going to lay down with the
In the
dogs in
front
the
yard.
front yard.
Yeah.
And if when we go on a walk, we spray them with the natural, sprays that we have, so that if they come into contact with a parasite like a flea, a tick, or a mosquito, we have protection. And it's just as effective as the toxic, medicines that are given. So, to the ones that have gone through that, because I'm really insensitive to that, the heartworm disease. I think you do have, like you mentioned, Jessica, earlier, you do have pets that live outside. And here's the common sense part. If you live in an area that is mosquito infested, like Pam, where you and I come from, mosquitoes all the time, all year
Everywhere.
round.
Yep.
Okay, I can hear Dr. Karen Becker in my ear saying, in my head saying, let's be commonsensical about it. Maybe we do need to do a heavier duty treatment. In that case, if we're outside all the time and exposed, heavy exposure, but what are we going to do to detoxify? So that's where your common sense comes in. If you're one of those pet parents that live in a situation where I have to have a stronger treatment than natural. But then we need to detox the liver and support the kidney and liver. but I would also encourage you to try the non-toxic.
And I also like it bothers me so much, and I know there's nothing the three of us could do about it, but it bothers me so much the idea that we need something heavier duty than natural. Because how did we get there? How did
Right.
we get to a point where, like, and this is all our fault, in my opinion, it's all humans' faults, that we have gotten to a point where we have disrupted the natural order of things so much that when we try to bring nature back, it's not strong enough or quote unquote good enough. Like that just bothers me. And that's a whole other topic. We don't need to
Yeah.
go down that tangent. But it just bothers me so much to think that like that's where we are.
No, that's true. That's a heavy topic, and that is so true, Jessica. And yeah, we'll let you talk about that on another podcast.
Yeah, let me tell you, I'll just talk forever on the things humans have done to this planet because it bothers me. But
You know, I want to mention one other thing about the common sense and humans. You know, we live in a society that we see something flashy and we have to have it. And one of the things that comes to mind is like anything with the name Yeti on it, you know. So Yeti got into the pet space by providing bowls. And everybody else did too, and not just to pick on that brand, which I love the brand and I use the coolers, but I don't use anything stainless steel. And that's what I wanted to talk about is what our pets eat from and drink from. And I had a personal experience with stainless steel, and it was through using an animal communicator that I came to this discovery during when Hank, who is now, passed, what Hank was very sick at one point in his cancer journey. And he was communicating to her, the communicator, that something was wrong with the water, our water in the house. And in that session, and I knew she was telling the truth because he had been bypassing the water bowl and going to the outside water fountain. We have a decorative fountain. And he had started, I caught him jumping over the fence. We had a little low fence over it to keep them away from it because it develops algae. So he was jumping over that fence to drink the water and he got giardia, which there's another common sense thing. I didn't treat it with antibiotics. I treated it with colloidal silver and he was fine in 48 hours. So anywho, and I didn't destroy his gut biome by putting him on immediately running to the vet. And we can talk
Yeah.
about that in a little bit. But anyhow, he bypasses the water bowl. But I'm so confused because we have an RO filter at the sink to, remove even the beneficial minerals from the water. And we have a whole house water system because here minerals are very heavy and corrode your plumbing. So I couldn't understand. Like I said earlier in the podcast, I took a moment instead of my brain racing, and the animal communicator was like, is it near something? What is it? What is the water in and whatever? And so we have 5 dogs, so we used a huge mixing bowl that we had 2 of. We used one for cooking and one for the water bowl. And I went and got it. It was stainless steel. And I turned it over and it said made in China. And for those of you listening, if you don't know the significance of that, that is not real stainless steel. It is sprayed with a coating. And what we were able to deduct is that there were chemicals or toxins leaching into the water. And that's why he was not drinking from the water bowl. So I quickly switched to a glass Pyrex bowl, and we have not had the problem ever since. But, the common sense thing here is like in my store, we only carry silicone, and we get asked often, do you have stainless steel bowls or, do you have ceramic? And there's issues with, I love the ceramic, beautiful bowls, but there's issues with those as well. And so, no, we use silicone. We use it for our own pets, and that's all that we sell in the store because you don't have the issues with those that you do with a lot of the common things. And there's a lot of stainless steel out there sold at discount stores, big box stores, your major pet stores. And I really want to encourage people to, pet parents, read everything like we talked about before on your labels, whether it's food or bowls. You need to read where it comes from because you can bet
Yeah, there are different
there's
types of stainless too, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. Is it like 1810 or
18
something?
tenths, I believe is what it is.
Yeah.
Supposedly, and I don't quote me, but supposedly the you're supposed to, like, the best quote, I'm air quoting, stainless is from the US or India. But I have not researched that. So, and no, we don't.
Gotcha.
We threw out the mixing bowls in the trash, and I don't use it for cooking either.
No, I don't blame you.
Yeah, because cheap, poor
Cheap.
quality stainless or stainless that has possibly toxic coating on it, like, yeah, any of that. Because I don't even trust glass if it comes from China because it could have a high lead content in it
That's true too.
because
Yeah,
they don't have the same standards that we do here in the US for like I don't think we're, again, don't quote me on this, but I don't think we're allowed to have any lead in our glass here.
or not.
So I try to only buy glass made in the USA.
Good old USA.
And how many pet parents even knew that fact? We just,
Yeah,
there's so much we don't know that we don't know.
Right, because you don't know what
You
you don't
you
know.
don't know. You don't know, and you think you're doing something good only to find out that you're doing something harmful.
but
Mm-hmm.
that goes back to why we also have the podcast, because we want to share what we've
Yeah,
learned so that people don't make the same mistakes that we have.
exactly. And another big mistake of lack of common sense is this over vaccination. It's like
Yeah.
taking your pets into the vet every year when you get the postcard. Oh, they're due for their vaccines or their flea meds or their checkup or whatever. And I don't have a problem with the checkup, but I just remember years ago, I would haul 6 cats in
Whoa.
multiple carriers to the vet for their annual checkup things, right? And their vaccines. And it never dawned on me until one time, the last time, I brought them home and they were all just puny and, just like sleeping and didn't want to eat. And it struck me. And I thought, why am I doing this? I don't go get vaccines every year. That was the connection. Was like, why am I doing this for them when I don't do that for me? That doesn't make sense. I don't
Yeah.
have to go get revaccinated every year. And they're indoor cats. We were in a two-story townhome. But I had never stopped and even had the random question, like, why am I doing this? You know? So that was one of those aha moments. And it was either it must have been around the same time, either before or after I had read my first article from Dr. Will Falconer, and he was talking about over vaccinations
Wow.
and how pets don't need to be revaccinated every year. So it was around that time. And that's it was such an impactful moment. It's like, you're damn right. I'm not doing this again. I'm not doing this again.
And
I'm
the thing
not.
is, yeah, that these veterinarians like Dr. Falconer, and others, I'm trying to remember, John Robb, like
Yeah.
they have actually, let me call out Dr. Will Falconer first because he was hired by the state of Hawaii
Mhm.
to study rabies
Yes.
because Hawaii is a
Right.
rabies free, like I don't know how long they've been rabies free, but they wanted to make sure that because they're an island
Yeah.
that, they have very strict rules for animals coming onto the island and vaccination status. And so they hired him to actually research and figure out what they actually needed to be doing. And if I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm not going to quote him here because I don't have a quote in front of me, but I think he's pretty disappointed in where they ended up because he did the research and said, we cannot oppose a calendar timeline on something as incredible as an immune system, right? There is much more, like the extent of what a duration of immunity, what that immune response winds up being as far as a length of time is vastly different from your requirement for hitting a date on a calendar.
Yeah.
And so I believe, and again, don't quote me on this, but I believe he's very disappointed in where they are now after having done all of that research for them to prove. So people like him, it's not that they're just talking out of their butt based on what they've read on a piece of paper, right? Like he's actually done the research. And Dr. John Robb, I'm not sure, I don't think he has his license anymore. I'm sure he fought long and hard to get it back, but he saw, I mean, anecdotal evidence is where science starts, first of all, by the way.
Yes, it does.
Yes, thank you.
And the more and more and more and more and more anecdotal evidence you have that all supports each other, like that in itself, just because you haven't published it doesn't mean it's not a study. And he saw that there is no way, like why you're giving, I don't know, let's say 1 milliliter of a vaccine to a Great Dane and a Chihuahua at the exact same amount. Like, why are we doing this? Makes absolutely no sense.
Right.
Because again, the amount isn't going to matter. Like, we're not taking an animal's individuality into account. We're not taking the magic, the literal magic of an immune system into account. And I'm just saddened by it.
Well, and then on the immune system, we need to talk about the fact about what do we do to boost it? Because that is the body's natural way to fight disease, to stay healthy. And we're never taught that. You know, when
Yeah.
we go in and we had a new puppy that was adopted from a rescue. This was yesterday. The puppy, they believe, was 9 weeks old. And it had the little tattoo where it had been fixed, which is awfully young, as we
I
know.
hate that word. I hate the word fixed because we're not fixing anything. We're breaking them.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
true. It's
We
true.
are. So so she was spayed. She had the tattoo, and we were crushed because she was 9 weeks old.
That's
And,
a shame.
there's new, well, it's probably not,
It's not.
whether it's new or not doesn't matter, but we are starting to hear more information about the benefits, health benefits of spaying and neutering later in life
Yes.
for our pets. So we've not been taught differently. And so, how beautiful is it that when you go to a holistic practitioner or a holistically minded veterinarian, whether they're integrative or fully holistic, it's a beautiful thing when they start talking about ways that we can keep the pet healthy over their life span, as opposed to we need this, this, and this shot. We need to do this flea, tick, and heartworm, pesticides, because that's what they are, people. Read the information. And if you can't pronounce the name, look it up, Google it. We Google everything else. Google it and see exactly what we're putting into our pets. And then the food. Jessica, you mentioned a few minutes back that raw fed dogs or kibble fed dogs are the ones, what you were implying is that they are more attractive to parasites. And that also has been studied. And while it may still be considered anecdotal and not widely believed, we see the evidence. I mean, we can see the evidence in all of our pets. I haven't used the parasite control in 10 years. And, what I do use, I use very, very, very sparingly and sporadically, just if it's the season and I see evidence of something that I need to protect them from. But the fact that they're raw fed keeps their gut healthier, their bloodstream healthier. And you guys can probably go into more depth than I can because I try to keep things on a higher level in my lane of the industry. But it's true. Just raw fed dogs are not high Alan, are not as attractive to parasites.
Because the parasite needs a host that isn't going to kill them, right? Like, it doesn't matter how big or small the animal or the being, or I don't know, it doesn't matter how big or small. The goal of all life forms is to stay alive and reproduce.
Yeah.
Period. End of story. Humans included. That's the goal, is to stay alive and reproduce. So if you are a mosquito, if you are a flea, if you are a tapeworm, it doesn't matter. If what you are looking for a host who is not going to kill you when you invade, right? You want some place where you can go and make a little home and be all comfy and cozy and feed off of the host or whatever they're eating. Parasites are very well known for soaking up nutrients from the food of the animals that they are being hosted by. And that's the goal in life. And honestly, even with a virus, like, the ultimate goal is also not to kill your host. You just want to stay there and be happy and cozy and eat and survive and reproduce. That's the goal. So you don't want to kill your host, though they will if, they get too greedy and there are too many of them. And if the animal, the host, is too healthy, they're going to kill you. So it's that like middle ground that I think kibble fed dogs have lived in for so long, because they are so, I'm trying to think of the word for it. Like, we nutritionally abuse them, and they are so adept at it, at staying alive when they're not thriving, that it's become normal, or, it's become common. But common doesn't mean normal. And I think that's also something I have excused myself from arguments online about, because people who want to say that common and normal are the same are not going to get it. They're just not. I'm not going to be able to get through to you. So there's no point in wasting my breath or my fingers if I'm typing. They're not the same. Just because it's common, it doesn't mean it's normal. It's very common for women to have PCOS. It's not normal, right? So like, it is a huge mind shift. It's a huge mindset shift, a paradigm shift, as Pam would call it.
Yeah, it is a paradigm
True.
shift.
It is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
I
so
thought
you
of
got others
I
you want
thought
to bring
of
up?
one other thing that people get stuck on. It's that hamster wheel of going in for a symptom, and they give them a shot or a food, and they might do okay for a little while. Like, especially, let's talk about steroids. Like, after a while, the steroid wears off, and then their condition comes roaring back even worse. So they go back in, they get another shot. So they're on this hamster wheel that never treats a symptom, and that is the same thing as hitting your head against the wall and not realizing that you're damaging your brain. You know what I'm saying? It's like, we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So I want people to think about, are you stuck in this repetitive cycle of symptom management? Or are you on a path to true healing? Because they are not the same path. So that is common sense when you stop and think about it. If you
We're,
have to,
we're suppressing symptoms, not fixing the problem.
yeah. And that's one of my soapboxes that I always talk about, is you've got to figure out the why. Because until you figure out the why, you are chasing symptoms, and it's a whack-a-mole game. And a lot of times vets, they don't know how to heal. They just know how to manage a symptom. And it's not a long-term fix. It's a short-term temporary solution to a very chronic, deep problem. So until pet parents can like have that aha moment, like, I don't want to keep coming in here and doing something. My dog is, or my cat isn't getting any better. We're just managing, and your pet's not going to thrive. And it could also just shorten their lifespan, because we're not treating the root of the problem. And so that's when you present it like that, like, tell me where this makes sense. We're in the door, we go home, we come back, and it's like this cycle
6 weeks.
every
Well,
6 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
and we were trained to do that for us first,
Yeah.
right? So we've gotten for decades now in this loop
Yep.
where there's something wrong. We go to a doctor, they prescribe us a medication. We now believe we can't live without that medication, even though we have probably the same symptoms continuing or they pop back up at some point. But we have now started to believe that we can't live without this medication, and now we need another medication because that one isn't working as well. So instead of saying this one isn't working, I'm going to remove it, we just say, can we add? Because probably the pharmaceutical companies have trained the doctors that way, and we have accepted that for ourselves. So why wouldn't we accept it
Yeah.
for our pets?
We accept it as a standard of care.
Yeah.
It's really not.
The
It's no
standard of
different.
sick care.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's no different than, we get a headache, we see commercial, it says, take this medication, it's over the counter. You can go to your local Walgreens or CVS or your grocery store and you can pick up this, Tylenol,
Miracle.
Advil, whatever it is to fix your headache. But how many people stop and ask themselves, why do you have a headache to begin with?
It's
You
so
know?
funny. I was at my sister's house this past weekend for Mother's Day, and one of my nieces, to be fair, I normally drink water all day long, and I had stopped at the farmer's market on the way, and I had sampled some lemonade because it was fresh squeezed lemonade. And I'm like, okay, if this is too sweet, I'm not going to buy it, because normally when you buy lemonade out, it's really, I mean, it's
Sugar.
sugar water, right?
Yeah.
With
Right,
the
right.
lemon spritz. Well, I sampled it, I tasted it, and it was barely sweet. Like, it was real fresh squeezed lemonade. So I bought some, and that's what I was drinking while I was at my sister's house. And by the time, I had been there a couple of hours, and I'm like, I'm getting tired, my head's starting to hurt, and I was sitting down with my 6-year-old niece, and I was like, I think I'm going to go ahead and leave. My head hurts. And my 6-year-old niece looks at me, doesn't miss a beat. She looks at me and she says, you need to drink some water.
Ah, well, I love that. There's hope.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
'Cause, I mean, we talk about all the time how like direct children are, right? They don't have
Yeah.
a filter.
No
And they're
filter.
just like, this is what I know. This is what I know.
I'm kind of still a child. Is that my excuse for my mouth? I hold back a lot.
Mm,
However, some days, are diamonds and I
yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
I hold back a lot professionally. I'm trying to hold back less personally because as women, I think we have hopefully started to learn that the more we hold back, the sicker we get.
Yeah.
But I do still hold back quite a bit professionally.
Or just choose your words.
We just have to be wise in
Yeah.
how we say things. That's all.
Because
Point,
the
yeah.
point is we care. We care deeply, deeply, deeply do we
Yes.
care. I mean, we all left other professions to do this and,
Yeah.
walked away from security by that, I mean, salary benefits, things of that nature
Yes.
to
Yep.
do this and to build something that we really were called to do. We have a passion for, and we really believe is needed in the world. And for me, on a personal level, it's like it was a calling. And, I heard Robert Kiyosaki talking on his podcast a few months back, and he was talking about when he was in college, his professor was asking the class, what does God need you to do? Because he was talking to these young, 19, 20-year-olds about what they're going to do with their lives, the rest of their lives. And his professor, being philosophical, says, what does God need you to do? Or I'm sorry, and I just messed this up. The professor asked Robert Kiyosaki and his classmates, what do you want to do with your life? And Robert Kiyosaki, for those that may not know him, he's the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He and his wife have, a podcast and a very successful business teaching people about money and managing it, investing it well, so that you can live a life of abundance, so that you can help others, not just help, yourself. But how, and this went back to the professor's question, because Robert Kiyosaki kept saying, I want to make lots of money. And the professor kept posing the question, what do you want to do with your life? I want to make lots of money. No, what do you want to do? And so finally, the classmates got Robert to be quiet, and the professor said pointedly, what does God need you to do? And that hit me when I heard that podcast, because it aligns with why I walked away from a career to do what I did, which people thought I was nuts, because I walked away from security and, recognition, some, you know, to go pop up a tent on the weekends and talk to people about the fact that it matters what you give your pets, in a nutshell. And so I did that 3 weekends a month for 3 years. Eventually, I had to get a part-time job to help contribute to the household income. You've still got bills to pay. And I have a spouse and dogs, and I don't want to make them, well, let's sell everything to support this dream. But the dream was a calling. And, we all have a story like that. And I hope that, those listening, and in our store, in my store, and you guys present content like you do, and you're consulting with your clients, I hope that they'll realize that this is what we were called to do. We want to make a difference, and we mean well. And I hope that what we say is received that way, is that we want to help.
Yeah.
We want to help. We want to make the world better by making it better for you and your pets. And so we come at it from a place of love. And I'm sure that there have been moments when I came to present something from a point less than lovely as it could have been. I am still human. And so for those moments, I hope I'm forgiven. But it all comes from a place of wanting to make the world better. Because when you know better, you do better. We always say that.
Yes.
Being truthful falls into alignment with that. Because if we're not truthful, then we are not able to really help. So,
Yeah, I do, especially, creating content on a platform like TikTok or Instagram. That is always at the front of my mind. And just with what I've been through lately in my life, I haven't been as active on the platforms, and I'm trying to get back active on the platforms. And I'm really finding myself hitting this roadblock where I'm like, who am I to say anything to anybody? I don't want to come off as holier than that, right? Like, I think when you take a break and you're trying to reassess and get back into it, you're kind of met with these feelings I'm not better than anybody. What right do I have to try? And that is the ultimate end of the day, what you just said. Like, I don't want somebody to take my words as gospel. I just want to plant a seed in somebody's head so that they're like, you know what, I do care so deeply for my dog or my cat. And I maybe am not going to act on this message immediately, but I'm going to tuck it away. And then when I keep hearing the same or similar messages, then they can start acting. But I appreciate that sentiment so much.
I hope that it helped at least one person.
Yeah.
It's about being true. Pam touched on earlier in the podcast about listening to yourself, and then the aha moment, and why, when she came to realize, I don't vaccinate myself every year. Why am I vaccinating these little 6-pound, 8-pound creatures? And then it goes to, that's the first domino. That's just right.
That was the Pandora's box
That, yes.
opening.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. That's
you look in, you're like, my gosh.
that description, because there it is.
And I think, like, you're probably very lucky that that's what it was that opened your mind, because as we were talking today, I remember so vividly, and it has been so many years now, but it's like it happened yesterday, when I put Revolution on my cat between his shoulder blades, and it gave him a chemical burn. And I will forever hate myself because I did that to him. Right? Like,
Right.
and I would hate for someone else to have those same feelings
Right.
that I had.
Yeah.
Well, that makes me remember something else that happened around that same time when I had that aha with the whole, why am I doing this every year? One of my cats developed a tumor on his leg, and it turns out it was from vaccines.
Yeah.
So they had to surgically remove the tumor growing on his leg, and it started to come back, but it came back also in his lungs, and that's what did him in. And when I was asking the vet, like, what causes this? And he was saying, oh, it's, probably the vaccines they found. And I'm like, he mentioned a certain vaccine and he goes, it's not always, necessary to give that one. And I'm like, well, then why didn't somebody tell me? I was mad.
Because you didn't know you had a choice.
I didn't know because I had 6 cats. So what do? I go down to the local Petco whenever they did the low cost vaccination day and they do the wham bam 3-in-1, whatever,
Yeah.
We
knock
did
it
the
out,
same
right?
thing. Yep.
Because hey, that's a
Too
good
many
deal.
pets. Yep.
So
Yeah.
that's what I would do, or to the low cost, spay neuter clinic down the street or whatever. No one ever asked me, are your pets endorsed? Does your cat need a feline leukemia vaccine? Does your cat need FERCP every year? Nobody asked me and nobody informed me. So I had to find out the hard way.
Yeah.
And that's a very, like you said, Jessica, that is not a good feeling to know that I contributed to that illness and that whole condition because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was.
And I think that's also why it is so hard for some people to acknowledge that there is another way of doing something, because then they do have to admit to themselves that whatever symptoms they're seeing in themselves or their pets is something that they had control over. They just didn't know they had control over it.
Yeah.
And that's really hard on your ego. Like, it's really hard.
Personal responsibility.
Yeah.
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 But the sooner pet parents watching this, for example, can take this information, don't make the same mistakes we've done. We're here to tell you how not to do it.
Yes.
So, and
That's
if
the
you
whole
have been
point.
doing those things, here's your invitation to rethink that.
Yeah.
Don't take our word for, end all be all. Go do your own research and then see where it all feels. How does it feel to you? How does it align with you and your values and how you want to raise your pets? Because we're here to help you learn how to do things better and do things differently to get better outcomes. Because at the end of the day, we would love our pets to live 25, 30 years, instead of a very short lifetime that has been kind of the norm, and it's been getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So if we can extend that longevity and have thriving, healthy pets, that's the goal.
Yeah. Well said.
Can't think of a better way to end the podcast. All right, Pam,
good.
Janet, thank you so much for being here with me today. I appreciate both of you so much. For those of you listening, we all appreciate you as well. Please give some extra love to your pets from all of us today, and we can't wait to talk to you again on Pet Health Junkies.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.